Bum, ba-da-ba, bum, 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 bum. Just kidding. I gotta get my YouTube Studio open because for some reason it wants me to have. Yeah, well. Why does it want me to have Steam open? Da, da, da. Steam? Where are you, Steam? I hate that my VTube Studio is tied to Steam. How many people are on right now? Okay. So, hi everyone. Cool. Ouch. I love these last minute trying to get things working. Dooby dooby doo. Shoop dooby doo wah. Okay. Let me throw the ads out there just to get them out of the way. Seen a few. Doop dooby doo dooby doo. Dooby dooby doo 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 doo. 2D, I got the right book up. Cool. Okay. I don't know if the commercials are over yet. Ouch. As I don't see them. Ouch. I would be in another chat picking on people. Where's someone picking on? I'm picking on. I'm picking on Guilty. So if you're not following Guilty Werewolf, go follow the Precious Wolfie. Okay. So many people are coming on right now. I kind of want to have to compete with all my friends. We all stream at the same time. Fuzzbot didn't pop up. That's surprising. Okay, why am I not in my usual mode? Oh, I got up to 300, no, 238 followers now. That's kind of cool. Okay, I'm going to try to fix stuff here. Anyway, I do not want it to automatically go to mod mode. What the hell? Just give me my channel as normal. That's how I like to see it. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Taco Bell, so. My sound alert's working. Okay, I'm hearing my sound alerts, but it, I don't know if my stream is hearing it. That just drives me freaking batty, but you know, I'm already batty, so it doesn't really have much of a far trip. Ouch. But anyway, we are going back to Fairy Tales tonight, and I may or may not have been drinking. Yeah. Anyway, this is where I plug my bookstore. Okay. No, Guilty just saw that I was streaming. Let me do something really quick. Clips. Let's see. I'm gonna watch my clip real quick because just for that, sending him the clip. Wow, Nightbot will not let me post that link. Oh well. Uh, post the clip link in here because I can post in my own chat. Okay, well, anyway. Bookstore. The bookshop.org/shop. I've got the link below. It is here if anyone is really interested. It is kind of a fake book front, but we offer access to real books. Because everyone needs books. Pretty much if you click the link and use my shop, I do get commission for it. I don't get the book sale, but I do get, partial commission because I'm sending you guys to where you can find books. And I'm working on getting access to uh, no, an affiliated link for Barnes and Nobles as well, so I can really start trying to plug some books for you guys because I'm reading books all the time, and you guys should really read. I mean, you can watch me still, and watch my videos and hang out with me, but I really want to encourage reading. And my other friends do like to encourage reading, but they also do public domain books, and they link to the Gutenberg Press, where you can also find free PDFs of the books. But honestly, I need the money. That way I can get my stuff upgraded, hopefully keep my computer running because it was trying to crash yesterday when I was playing Sherlock Holmes. But yeah, I do have the bookstore. I said I posted the link. But yeah, here we are. Let me check Twitter to see if my stuff went out. Did my post make it to Twitter? Um, okay. I don't need to see that right off. Uh, where's it looking at? Okay. Did my announcement go out? Okay, yes, it does say that I'm streaming. Cool. No one has liked or interacted with it at all, but whatever. That'll happen. But anyway, we are getting back into fairy tales tonight. I wish, I really wish my model was a little bit more responsive. And I guess I could try to do Bridger, but that just seems like extra steps that bog down my computer even more than it already is. I mean, really, you would think that they would be able to go straight between VTube Studio on the phone to VTube Studio on the computer without having any real issues. But no, it doesn't work that way. Because stuff doesn't like to work that way, apparently. Activate third-party clients. Ah. Okay, well, that's working. Uh, oh, why am I not connected? Let's authorize. Okay. That is weird. My YouTube Studio wasn't hooked up to. Oh, what's there? Okay. Log in and activate. Yes. Now you guys can drop gummies on me again. I'm always going to call them gummies. It's like a chat term. Okay, so start sending. Okay. Rebridger's a little bit more active. Still not responsive to my mouth. I don't know why. My eyes work a little bit better, I guess. But, yeah. Uh, let's get over to the fairy tale, shall we? And welcome to the library, as opposed to my study, which is where I've been reading the Sherlock Holmes books from. Yes, my underground apartment underneath the bookshop has a lot of different rooms. One day I'm going to try to lay out the actual plans for the bookshop, because I would love if I could have a real brick and mortar store. But until then, I still just have my computer one. So, make sure my fireplace is working right. Nope. It's not the fireplace. This one is the library sound effects. Yeah. And it is playing. Cool. Because it's really weird when ads pop up in my background and I don't know what the hell's going on. But anyway, it is time for fairy tales. And we are already late starting. So let me get to the old book open. Oh, new old book. I really wish I could find someone who could do... Oh. Okay, one of my TikToks just got liked. I love getting notices like that, especially when I don't expect to see anything like that. Let me check something real quick, because I'm always having to double check everything. Emote, 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 emote. Yeah, my computer is already lagging out of hell. Lovely. Okay, through the emotes. Oh, there they are. Okay. And bouncing off my own head. Cool. Cool. Very cool. What is wrong with this picture, though? Okay, I have that lowered. I'm not going to mess with it right now. It doesn't need to be messed with. I'll just leave it there. Anyway, we need to get into the story, because it is already past time. It is 9:14, and we are 4 minutes late getting into the stories. So, let us get into the story then, shall we? Our first story for the night, The Two Caskets, from the Orange Fairy Book. Far, far away in the midst of a pine forest, there lived a woman who had both a daughter and a stepdaughter. Ever since her own daughter was born, the mother had given her all that she cried for, so she grew up to be as cross and disagreeable as she was ugly. Her stepsister, on the other hand, had spent her childhood working hard to keep house for her father, who died soon after his second marriage, and she was much beloved by the neighbors for her goodness and industry, as she was for her beauty. As the years went on, the difference between the two girls grew even more marked, and the old woman treated her stepdaughter worse than ever, and was always on the watch for some pretext for beating her or depriving her from her food. Anything, however foolish, was good enough for this, and one day, when she could think of nothing better, she set both the girls to spin while sitting on a low wall of a well.
"And you had better mind what you do," she said, "for the one whose thread breaks first shall be thrown to the bottom."
But, of course, she took good care that her own daughter's flax was fine and strong, while her stepsister had only some coarse stuff, which no one would have thought of using. As might be expected, in a very little while the poor girl's thread snapped, and the old woman, who had been watching from behind the door, seized her stepdaughter by the shoulders and threw her into the well.
"That is an end of you," she said.
But she was wrong, for it was only the beginning. Down, down, down went the girl. It seemed as if the well must reach the very middle of the earth. But at last her feet touched the ground, and she found herself in a field more beautiful than ever, even the summer pastures of her native mountains. Trees waved in the soft breeze, the flowers of the brightest colors danced in the grass. And though she was quite alone, the girl's heart danced too, for she felt happier than she had since her father died. So she walked through the meadow until she came to an old tumble-down fence, so old that it was a wonder it managed to stand up at all, and it looked as if it depended for support on an old man's beard that climbed over it. The girl paused for a moment as she came up and gazed about the place for where she might safely cross. But before she could move, a voice carried from the fence.
"Do not hurt me, little maiden. I am so old, so old. I have not much longer to live."
And the maiden answered,
"No, I will not hurt you. Fear nothing."
and then seeing the spot where the clematis grew very thickly than in other places, she jumped lightly over.
"May all go well with thee,"
Said the fence as the girl walked on. Soon she left the meadow and turned into a path which ran between two flowery hedges. But right in front of her stood an oven, and though its open door, she could see a pile of white loaves.
"Eat as many as you like, but do me no harm, little maiden,"
cried the oven, and the maiden told her to fear nothing, for she never hurt anything, and was very grateful for the oven's kindness in giving her such a beautiful white loaf. When she had finished it, down to the last crumb, she shut the oven door and said, "Good morning."
"May all go well with thee,"
said the oven as the girl walked on. By and by she became very thirsty, and seeing a cow with a milk pail hanging from her horn, turned towards her.
"Milk me and drink as much as you will, little maid,"
cried the cow.
"but be sure you spill none on the ground, and do me no harm, for I have never harmed anyone."
"Nor I," answered the girl. "Fear nothing." So she sat down and milked till the pail was nearly full. Then she drank it all up, except a little drop on the bottom.
"Now throw what any that is left at my hoofs, and hang the pail on my horns again,"
said the cow. And the girl did as she was bid, and kissed the cow on her forehead, and went on her way. Many hours had passed since the girl had fallen down the well, and the sun was setting. Where shall I spend the night? She thought, and suddenly she saw before her a gate which she had not noticed before, and a very old woman leaning against it. Good evening, said the girl politely, and the old woman answered,
Good evening, my child. Would that anyone was be as polite as you. Are you in search of anything?
I am in search of a place, replied the girl, and the woman smiled and said,
Then stop a little while and comb my hair, and you shall tell me all the things you can do.
Willingly, mother, answered the girl, and she began combing out the old woman's hair, which was long and white. Half an hour passed in this way, and then the old woman said,
As you did not think yourself too good to comb me, I will show you where you may take service. Be prudent and patient, and all will go well.
So the girl thanked her, and set out for a farm at a little distance, where she was engaged to milk the cows and sift the corn. As soon as it was light next morning, the girl got up and went into the cow-house. I'm sure you must be hungry, said she, patting each in turn, and then she fetched hay from the barn, and while they were eating it, she swept out the cow-house and strewn clean straw upon the floor. The cows were so pleased with this, they took care, with the care she took of them, that they stood quite still while she milked them, and did not play any tricks on her that they had played on other dairy maids, who were rough and rude. And when she had done, and was going up to get from her stool, she found sitting around her a whole circle of cats, black and white, tabby and tortoiseshell, who all cried with one voice,
Well, we are very thirsty. Please give us some milk.
My poor little pussies, she said, of course you shall have some. And she went into the dairy, followed by all the cats, and gave each one a little red saucerful. But before they drank, they all rubbed themselves against her knees and purred by way of thanks. The next thing the girl had to do was to go to the storehouse and to sift the corn through a sieve. While she was busy rubbing the corn, she heard a whir of wings, and a flock of sparrows flew in at the window.
We are very hungry. Give us some corn. Give us some corn.
They cried, and the girl answered, Oh, you poor little birds, of course you shall have some. And she scattered a fine handful over the floor. And when they had finished, they flew on her shoulders and flapped their wings by way of thanks. Time went by, and no cows in the whole countryside were so fat and well tended as hers, and no dairy had such milk to show. The farmer's wife was so well satisfied that she gave her higher wages, and treated her like her own daughter. At length, one day, the girl was bidden by her mistress to come into the kitchen, and when there, the old woman said to her, I know you can tend cows and keep a dairy. Now let me see what you can do besides. Take the sieve to the well and fill it with water. Bring it home to me without spilling one drop by the way. The girl's heart sank at this order, for how was it possible for her to do her mistress's bidding? However, she was silent, and taking the sieve, went down to the well with it. Stopping over the side, she filled it to the brim, but as soon as she lifted it, the water ran out the holes. Again and again she tried, but not a drop would remain in the sieve, and she was just turning away in despair when the flock of sparrows flew down from the sky.
Ashes! Ashes!
They all twittered, and the girl looked at them and said,
Well, I can't be in a worse plight than I already am, so I will take your advice.
and she ran back to the kitchen and filled her sieve with ashes. Then once more she dipped the sieve into the well, and behold, this time not a drop of water disappeared.
Here's the sieve, mistress,
Cried the girl, going into the room where the old woman was sitting.
You are very clever indeed, answered she, or else someone helped you who is skilled in magic.
But the girl kept silence, and the old woman asked her no more questions. Many days passed, which the girl went about her work as usual, but at length one day the old woman called her and said,
I have something more for you to do. There are 2 yarns, one white and one black. What you must do is to wash them in the river till the black one becomes white, and the white black.
And the girl took them to the river and washed hard for several hours. But wash as she would, they would never change one.
This is worse than the sieve,
Thought she, and was about to give up in despair when there came a rush of wings through the air, and on every twig of the birch trees by the banks of the river was perched a sparrow.
Cast the black to the east, the white to the west.
They sang all at once, and the girl dried her tears and felt brave once again. Picking up the black yarn, she stood facing the east and dipped it in the river. In an instant it grew white as snow. Then, turning to the west, she held the white yarn in the water, and it became as black as a crow's wing. She looked back at the sparrows and smiled and nodded to them, and flapped their wings in reply as they swiftly flew away. At the sight of the yarn, the old woman was struck dumb, and when at length she found her voice, asked the girl what magician had helped her to do what no one had done before. But she got no answer, for the maiden was afraid of bringing trouble on her little friends. For many weeks the mistress shut herself up in a room, and the girl went about her work as usual. She hoped that there was an end to the difficult tasks which had been set to her, but in this she was mistaken, for one day the old woman appeared suddenly in the kitchen and said to her,
There's one more trial to which I must put you, and if you do not avail in that, you will be left in peace forevermore. Here are the yarns which you washed. Take them and weave them into a web that is smooth as a king's robe, and see that it is spun by time that the sun sets. This is the easiest thing I've been set to do,
thought the girl, who was a good spinner. But when she began, she found that the skein tangled and broke every moment.
Oh, I can never do it,
she cried at last, and leaned her head against the loom and wept. But at that instant the door opened, and there entered, one behind another, a procession of cats.
What is the matter, fair maiden?
They asked, and the girl answered,
My mistress has given me this yarn to weave into a piece of cloth, which must be finished by sunset, and I've not even begun yet, for the yarn breaks whenever I touch it. Well, if that is all, dry your eyes, cried the cats. We will manage it for you.
And they jumped on the loom, and wove so fast and so skillfully, that in a very short time the cloth was ready, and was as fine as any king had ever worn. The girl was so delighted at the sight of it that she gave each cat a kiss on the forehead, and they left the room behind, one the other, as they had come. "Who has taught you this wisdom?" asked the old woman, after she had passed her hands twice or thrice over the thread, and could find no roughness anywhere. But the girl only smiled and did not answer. She had learned early the value of silence. After a few weeks, the old woman sent her maid and told her that her year of service was now up, and she was free to return home, but that, for her part, the girl had served her so well that she hoped she might stay with her. But at these words the maid shook her head and answered gently, "I have been happy here, madam, and I thank you for your goodness to me. But I have left behind me a stepsister and a stepmother, and I am fain to be with them once more." The old woman looked at her for a moment, and then said, "Well, that must be as you like. But as you have worked faithfully for me, I will give you a reward. Go down to the loft above the storehouse, and there you will find many caskets. Choose one which pleases you best, but be careful not to open it till you have set it in a place where you wish it to remain." The girl left the room to go to the loft, and as soon as she got outside, she found all the cats waiting for her. Walking in procession was their custom, and they followed her into the loft, which was filled with caskets big and little, plain and splendid. She lifted one up and looked at it, then put it down to examine another yet more beautiful. Which should she choose? The yellow or the blue? The red or the green? The gold or the silver? She hesitated long, and went first to one and then to another, when she heard the cats' voices calling,
"Take the black, take the black."
The words made her look around. She had seen no black caskets, but as the cats continued their cry, she peered into several corners that had remained unnoticed, and at length discovered a little black box, so small and so black that it might easily have been passed over.
"This is the casket that pleases me best, mistress,"
said the girl, carrying it into the house. And the old woman smiled and nodded, and bade her go to her way. So the girl set forth after bidding farewell to the cows and the cats and the sparrows, who all wept as they said goodbye. She walked on and on and on until she reached the flowery meadow, and there suddenly something happened. She never knew what, but she was sitting on the well of her stepmother's yard. Then she got up and entered the house. The woman and her daughters stared as if they had turned into stone, but at length the stepmother gasped out,
"So you are alive after all? Well, luck was ever against me. And where have you been this year?"
The girl told how she had taken service in the underworld, and besides her wages, had brought home with her a little casket, which she would like to set up in her room.
"Give me the money and take the ugly little box out of the outhouse,"
cried the woman, beside herself with rage, and the girl, quite frightened at her violence, hastened away, with her precious box clasped to her bosom. The outhouse was in a very dirty state, and no one had been near it since the girl had fallen down the well. Ew. But she scrubbed and swept till everything was clean again, and then she placed the little casket on a small shelf in the corner.
"Now I may open it,"
She said to herself, and unlocking it with the key which hung to its handle, she raised the lid. but started back as she did so, almost blinded by the light that burst down upon her. No one would ever have guessed that the little black box could have held such a quantity of beautiful things. Rings, crowns, girdles, necklaces, all made with wonderful stones, and they shone with such brilliance that not only the stepmother and her daughter, but all the people around came running to see if the house was on fire. Of course, the woman felt quite ill with greed and envy, and would have certainly taken all the jewels for herself, had she not feared the wrath of the neighbors, who loved her stepdaughter much more than they hated her. But if she could not seal the casket and its contents for herself, at least she could get another like it, and perhaps a still richer one. She bade her own daughter sit on the edge of the well, and threw her into the water, exactly as she had done with the other girl. And exactly as before, the flowery meadow lay at the bottom. Every inch of the way she trod the path which her stepsister had trodden, and saw the things which she had seen. But there the likeness ended. When the fence prayed her to do it no harm, she laughed rudely and tore up some of the stakes so that she might get over more easily. When the oven offered her bread, she scattered the loaves on the ground and stamped on them. And after she had milked the cow and drunk as much as she wanted, she threw the rest on the grass, kicked the pail to bits. Never heard them say, as they looked after her,
"You shall not have done this to me for nothing."
Towards the end of the evening, she reached a spot where the old woman was leaning against the gate-post, but she passed her by without even a word.
"Have you no manners in your country?"
asked the crone.
"I can't stop and talk. I'm in a hurry," answered the girl. "It's getting late, and I have to find a place." "Stop and comb my hair for a little while," said the old woman, "and I will help you find a place." "Comb your hair, indeed! I have something better to do than that."
And slamming the gate in the crone's face as she went by her, she never heard the words that followed her.
"You shall not have done this to me for nothing."
By and by, the girl arrived at the farm, and she was engaged to look after the cows and sift the corn as her stepsister had been. But it was only when someone was watching her that she even did her work. At other times, the cowhouse was dirty. The cows were ill-fed and beaten, so that they kicked over the pail and tried to butter, and everyone said they had never seen such a thin cows or such poor milk. As for the cats, she chased them all away, and ill-treated them so that they had not even the spirits to chase the rats and mice, which nowadays ran about everywhere. And when the sparrows came to beg her for some corn, they fared no better than the cows or the cats, for the girl threw her shoes at them, and they flew in a fright into the woods, took shelter among the trees. Months passed in this manner, when one day the mistress called the girl to her. "All that I have given you to do you have done ill," she said. "Yet I will give you another chance. For though you cannot tend cows or divide the grain from the chaff, there may be other things that you can do better. Therefore, take the sieve to the well and fill it with water, and see that you bring it back without spilling a single drop." The girl took the sieve and carried it to the well, as her sister had done. But no little birds came to help her, and after dripping it in the well 2 or 3 times, she brought it back empty. "I thought as much," said the angry woman. "She is as useless in one thing as she is useless in another." Perhaps the mistress may have thought that the girl had learned a lesson, but if she did, she was quite mistaken, as the work was no better done than before. By and by she sent her again and gave the maid the black and white yarn to wash in the river. But there was no one to tell her the secret by which black would turn white and white black. So she brought them back as they were. This time the old woman only looked at her grimly, but the girl was too well pleased with herself to care what anyone thought about her. After some weeks, the third trial came, and the yarn was given to her to spin, as it had been given to her stepsister before her. But no processions of cats entered the room to weave the fine cloth, and at sunset she only brought back to her mistress an armful of dirty, tangled wool. "There seems to be in this world nothing you can do," said the old woman, and left her to herself. Soon after this, the year was up, and the girl went to her mistress to tell her that she wished to go home. "Little desire I have to keep you," answered the old woman. "For no one thing have you done as you ought. Still, I will give you some payment. Therefore, go up into the loft and choose for yourself one of the caskets that lies there. But see that you do not open it till you place it where you wish it to stay." This was what the girl had been hoping for, and so rejoiced she was that, without even stopping to thank the old woman, she ran as fast as she could to the loft. There were caskets, red and blue, green and yellow, silver and gold, and there in the corner stood a little black casket, just like the one her stepsister had brought home. "There are so many jewels in that little black thing. This big red one will hold twice the number," she said to herself, snatching it up and setting off down the road, without even going to bid farewell to her mistress. "See, mother! See what I have brought!" cried she as she entered the cottage, holding the casket in both hands.
"What have you got? Something different from the little black box,"
answered the old woman with delight. But the girl was so busy finding a place for it to stand that she took little notice of her mother.
"It will look best here," she said. "No, here,"
setting it first on one piece of furniture and then on another.
"No, after all, it is fine to live in a kitchen. Let us place it in the guest chamber."
So mother and daughter carried it proudly upstairs and put it on a shelf over the fireplace. Then, untying the key from the handle, they opened the box. As before, a bright light leapt out directly as the lid was raised, but it did not spring from a lustre of jewels, but from hot flames which darted along the walls and burnt up the cottage and all that was in it, and the mother and daughter as well. As they had done to the stepdaughter when she came home, the neighbors all hurried to see what was the matter. But they were too late. Only the hen house was left standing, and, in spite of her riches, there the stepdaughter was living happily to the end of her days. Oh, ouch. Give a little stretch, give a little drink, hydrate tonight, hydrate tonight. thinks I'm hearing another chats right now. Okay. Uh, and now, for our second story of the night. Little One Eye, Little Two Eyes, and Little Three Eyes, from the Green Fairy Book. There was once a woman who had 3 daughters, of whom the eldest was called Little One Eye, because she only had one eye in the middle of her forehead. And the second, Little Two Eyes, because she had 2 eyes like other people. And the youngest, Little Three Eyes, because she had 3 eyes, and her third eye was also in the middle of her forehead. But because Little Two Eyes did not look any different from other children, her sisters and mother could not bear her.
You with your 2 eyes are no better than common folk. You don't belong to us.
They pushed her here and threw her wretched clothes there, and gave her to eat only what they had left, and they were as unkind to her as ever they could be. Male kid syndrome. It happened one day that Little Two Eyes had to go out into the fields to take care of the goat. But she was quite hungry because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down in the meadow and began to cry. And she cried so much that 2 little brooks ran from her eyes. But when she looked up once in her grief, there stood a woman beside her who asked, "Little Two Eyes, what are you crying for?" Little Two Eyes answered,
Have I not reason to cry? Because I have 2 eyes like other people, and my sisters and my mother cannot bear me. They push me out of one corner into another, and give me nothing to eat except what they leave. Today they've given me so little that I'm still quite hungry.
And then the wise woman said, "Little Two Eyes, dry your eyes, and I will tell you something so that you need never be hungry again. Only say to your goat, 'Little goat bleat, little table appear,' and a beautifully spread table will stand before you, with the most delicious food on it, so that you can eat as much as you want. And when you have had enough and don't want the little table any more, you only have to say, 'Little goat bleat, little table away,' and then it will vanish." Then the wise woman went away, but Little Two Eyes thought,
I must try it at once. If what she has told me is true, then I am more hungry than ever.
and she said,
"Little goat bleat, little table appear."
and scarcely had she uttered the words when there stood a little table before her, covered with a white cloth, on which were arranged a plate with a knife and fork and a silver spoon, and the most beautiful dishes, which were smoking hot, as if they had just come out of a kitchen. And then Little Two Eyes said the shortest grace she knew,
Thanks.
and set to work and made a good dinner. And when she had had enough, she said, as the wise woman had told her,
Little goat bleat, little table away.
let's find one of these goats. And immediately the table and all on it disappeared again.
That was a splendid way of housekeeping,
Thought Little Two Eyes. And she was quite happy and contented. In the evening, when she went home with her goat, she found a little earthen dish with the food that her sisters had thrown to her, and she did not touch it. The next day she went out again with her goat, and left a few scraps which were given her. The first and second times her sisters did not notice this, but when it continued again, they remarked it and said,
Something is the matter with little Two Eyes, for she always leaves her food now, and she used to gobble up all that was given her. She must have found other means of getting food.
So, in order to get to the truth, little One Eye told to go out with little Two Eyes when she drove the goat to the pasture, and to notice particularly what she got there, and whether anyone brought her food and drink. Now, when little Two Eyes was setting out, little One Eye came up to her and said,
I will go into the field with you and see if you take good care of the goat, and if you drive him properly to get grass.
But little Two Eyes saw what little One Eye had in her mind, and she drove the goat into a long grass and said,
Come, little One Eye, we will sit down here, and I will sing you something.
Little One Eye sat down, and she was very much tired from the long walk to which she was not used to. But by the hot day, and the little Two Eyes went on singing. Little One Eye, are you awake? Little One Eye, are you asleep? She shut her one eye and fell asleep. When little Two Eyes saw that little One Eye was asleep and could do nothing, she said,
Little complete, little table appear.
and sat down at her table and ate and drank as much as she wanted. Then she said again,
Little complete, little table away.
and in the twinkling of an eye, all had vanished. Little Two Eyes then woke little One Eye and said,
Little One Eye, you meant to watch, and instead you went to sleep. In the meantime, the goat might have run far away. Come, we will go home.
So they went home, and little Two Eyes again left her little dish untouched. And little One Eye could not tell her mother why she would not eat, and said as an excuse,
I was sleepy out of doors.
The next day the mother said to little Three Eyes,
This time you will go with little Two Eyes and watch wherever she is eating, out in the fields, and whether anyone brings her food and drink. For eat and drink she must secretly do.
So little Three Eyes went with little Two Eyes and said,
I will go with you and see if you take good care of the goat, and if you drive him properly to get grass.
But little Two Eyes knew what little Three Eyes had in mind, and she drove the goat out into the tall grass and said,
We will sit down here, little Three Eyes, and I will sing you something.
Little Three Eyes sat down. She was tired by the walk and the hot day, and little Two Eyes sang the same little song again.
Little Three Eyes, are you awake?
But instead of singing as she ought to have done,
Little Three Eyes, are you asleep?
she sang without thinking.
Little Two Eyes, are you asleep?
She went on singing.
Little Three Eyes, are you awake? Little Two Eyes, are you asleep?
So that the Two Eyes of little Three Eyes fell asleep. Oops. But the third, which was not spoken to in the little rhyme, did not fall asleep. Of course, little Three Eyes shut that eye also out of cunning, to look as if she were asleep. But it was blinking and could see everything quite well. And when little Two Eyes thought that little Three Eyes was sound asleep, she said her rhyme.
Little goat bleat, little table appear.
And ate and drank to her heart's content, and then made the table go away again by saying,
Little goat bleat, little table away.
But Little Three Eyes had seen everything. Then Little Two Eyes came to her and woke her and said,
Well, Little Three Eyes, have you been asleep? You watch well. Come, we will go home.
When they reached home, Little Two Eyes did not eat again, and Little Three Eyes said to the mother,
I know why that proud thing eats nothing. When she says to the goat in the field, Little goat, bleats, little table appear, a little table stands before her spread with the best food, much better than we have. And when she has had enough, she says, Little goat, bleats, little table away. And everything disappears again. I saw it exactly. She made two of my eyes go to sleep with a little rhyme, but the third one in my forehead remained awake, luckily.
Then the envious mother cried out,
Will you fare better than we do? You shall not have the chance to do so again.
and she fetched a knife and killed the goat. When Little Two Eyes saw this, she went out of grief and sat down in the meadow and wept bitter tears. Then again the old wise woman stood before her and said,
Little Two Eyes, what are you crying for? Have I not reason to cry? She answered. The goat, which when I said the little rhyme spread the table so beautifully, my mother is killed, and now I must suffer hunger and want again.
Then the wise woman said,
Little Two Eyes, I will give you a good piece of advice. Ask your sisters to give you the heart of the dead goat, and bury it in the earth before the house door. That will bring you good luck.
Then poof, she disappeared, and Little Two Eyes went home and said to her sisters,
Dear sisters, do give me something of my goat. I ask nothing better than its heart.
Then they laughed and said,
You can have that if you want nothing more.
and Little Two Eyes took the heart and buried it that evening when all was quiet, as the wise woman had told her, before the house door. The next morning, when they all awoke and came to the house, there stood a most wonderful tree, which had leaves of silver and fruit of gold growing on it. You never saw anything more lovely or gorgeous in your life. But they did not know how the tree had grown up in the night. Only Little Two Eyes knew that it had sprung from the heart of the goat, for it was just standing there where she had buried it in the ground. Then the mother said to Little One Eye,
Climb up, my child. Break us off the fruit from the tree.
Little One Eye climbed up, but just as she was going to take hold of one of the golden apples, the bough sprang out of her hands. And this happened every time, so that she could not break off a single apple. However hard she tried. Then the mother said,
Little Three Eyes, do climb up. You with your 3 eyes can see round better than Little One Eye.
So Little One Eye slid down, and Little Three Eyes climbed up. But she was not any more successful. Look round as she might, the golden apples bent themselves back. At last the mother got impatient and climbed up herself, but she was even less successful than Little One Eye or Little Three Eyes in catching hold of the fruit, and only grasped at empty air. Then Little Two Eyes said,
I will try just once. Perhaps I shall succeed better.
but Little Two Eyes climbed up, and the apples did not jump away from her, but behaved quite properly so that she could pluck them off, one after the other, and brought a whole apron down with her. The mother took them from her, and instead of behaving better to poor Little Two Eyes, as they ought to have done, They were jealous that only she could reach the fruit and behaved still more unkindly to her. It happened one day that when they were all standing together in the tree, that a young knight came riding along. "Be quick, little Two Eyes," cried the sister. "Creep under this, and so that you will not disgrace us." And they put over poor little Two Eyes as quickly as possible in an empty cask, which was standing close to the tree. And they pushed the golden apples which she had broken off under her. When the knight, who was very handsome young man, as knights would be, rode up, and he wondered to see the marvelous tree of gold and silver, and said to the two sisters, "Whose is this beautiful tree? Whoever will give me a twig of it shall have whatever she wants." And then little One Eye and little Three Eyes answered that the tree belonged to them, and they would certainly break off a twig. They gave themselves a great deal of trouble, but in vain. The twigs and the fruit bent back from their hands every time. And then the knight said, "It is very strange that the tree should belong to you, and yet you have not the power to break anything from it." But they would have the tree as theirs, and while they were saying this, little Two Eyes rolled a couple of golden apples from under the cask, so that they lay at the knight's feet. For she was angry with little One Eye and little Three Eyes for not speaking the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was astonished, and he asked where they had come from. Little One Eye and little Three Eyes answered that they had another sister, but she could not be seen because she only had two eyes, like ordinary people. But the knight demanded to see her and called out, "Little Two Eyes, come forth!" Then little Two Eyes came out from under the cask quite happily, and the knight was astonished at her great beauty, and said, "Little Two Eyes, I am sure you can break off a twig from the tree."
"Yes,"
she answered.
"I can, for the tree is mine."
So she climbed up and broke off a small branch with its silver leaves and golden fruit without any trouble, and gave it to the knight. Then he said, "Little Two Eyes, what shall I give you for this?"
"Ah,"
answered Little Two Eyes.
"I suffer hunger and thirst, want and sorrow from early morning till late in the evening. If you would take me with you and free me from this, I should be happy."
The knight lifted Little Two Eyes on his horse and took her home to his father's castle. There he gave her beautiful clothes and food and drink, and because he loved her so much, he married her, and the wedding was celebrated with great joy. When the handsome carried Little Two Eyes away with him, the two sisters envied her good luck at first.
"But the wonderful tree is still with us after all," they thought. "And although we cannot break any fruit from it, everyone will stop and look at it, and will come to us and praise it. Who knows whether we may reap a harvest from it?"
But the next morning the tree had flown, and their hopes with it. And when Little Two Eyes looked out her window, there it stood underneath, to her great delight. Little Two Eyes lived happily for a very long time. Once two poor women came to the castle to beg alms. Then Little Two Eyes looked at them and recognized both her sisters, Little One Eye and Little Three Eyes, who had become so poor that they came to beg bread at her door. But Little Two Eyes bade them welcome, and she was so good to them that they both repented from their hearts for having been so unkind to their sister. Yes, did the mother have? It doesn't say. She probably couldn't have had two eyes because she was picking on two eyes for only having two eyes and being so plain. Maybe she had four. Doubt it. She wore glasses. Let's see. Pokemon game keeps throwing emojis at me. Oh well. Wow, this next story has a interesting title. Our third story for the night. Long, Broad, and Quickeye from the Grey Fairy book. Once upon a time there lived a king who had only one son whom he loved dearly. Now one day the king sent for his son and said to him, "My dearest child, my hair is grey, and I am old, and soon I shall feel no more the warmth of the sun or look upon the trees and flowers. But before I die, I should like to see you with a good wife. Therefore marry my son as speedily as possible." "My father," replied the prince, "now and always I ask for nothing better than to do your bidding, but I know of no daughter-in-law that I could give you."
On hearing these words, the old king drew from his pocket a key of gold and gave it to his son, saying, "Go up the staircase, right to the top of the tower. Look carefully around you, and then come and tell me which you like best of all that you see." So the young man went up. He had never before seen the tower, and had no idea what it might contain. The staircase wound round and round and round, till the prince was almost giddy, and every now and then he caught sight of large rooms that opened from the side. But he had been told to go to the top, and to the top he went. Then he found himself in a hall, which had an iron door at one end. This door he unlocked with a golden key, and he passed through into a vast chamber which had a roof of blue sprinkled with golden stars, and a carpet of green silk soft as turf. 12 windows, framed in gold, let in the light of the sun, and on every window was painted a figure of a young girl, each more beautiful than the last. While the prince gazed at them in surprise, not knowing which he liked best, the girls began to lift their eyes and smile at him. He waited, expecting them to speak, but no sound came. Suddenly he noticed that one of the windows was covered by a curtain of white silk. He lifted it, and saw before him an image of a maiden, beautiful as the day, and sad as the tomb, clothed in a white robe, having a girdle of silver and a crown of pearls. The prince stood and gazed at her, as if he had been turned into stone. But as he looked, the sadness which was on her face seemed to pass into his heart, and he cried out, "This one shall be my wife, this one and no other." As soon as the words, the young girl blushed and hung her head, and all the other figures vanished. The young prince was quickly back to his father, and told him all that he had seen and which wife he had chosen. The old man listened to him, full of sorrow, and spoke. "You have done ill, my son, to search out that which was hidden, and you are running to meet a great danger. This young girl has fallen into the power of a wicked sorcerer who lives in an iron castle. Many young men have tried to deliver her, and none have ever come back. But what is done is done, You have given your word, and it cannot be broken. Go, dare your fate, and return to me safe and sound. The prince embraced his father, mounted his horse, and set forth to seek his bride. He rode on gaily for several hours till he found himself in the wood where he had never been before, and soon lost his way among the winding paths and deep valleys. He tried in vain to see where he was. The thick trees shut out the sun and would not tell which was north and which was south, so that he might know which direction to make for. He felt in despair, and he had quite given up all hope of getting out of this horrible place, when he heard a voice calling from him.
Hey, stop a minute.
The prince turned around, and he saw behind him a very tall man, running as fast as his legs could carry him.
Wait for me,
He panted.
and take me into your service. If you do, you will never be sorry.
Who are you? Asked the prince. And what can you do?
Long is my name, and I can lengthen my body at will. Do you see that nest up there on the top of the pine tree? Well, I can get it for you without having the trouble of climbing the tree.
And Long stretched himself up, and up, and up, till he was very soon as tall as the pine itself. He put the nest in his pocket, and before you could wink your eyelid, he had made himself small again, and stood before the prince. Yes, you know your business, he said. But birds' nests are no use to me. I am too old for them. Now, if you were only able to get me out of this wood, would indeed be good for something.
There's no difficulty about that,
replied Long, and he stretched himself up and up until he was 3 times as tall as the tallest tree in the forest. And then he looked around and said,
We must go in this direction in order to get out of the wood.
And shortening himself again, he took the prince's horse by the bridle and led him along. Very soon they got clear of the forest, and saw before them the wide plain ending in a pile of high rocks, covered here and there with trees, and very much like the fortifications of a town. As they left the wood behind, Long turned to the prince and said,
My lord, here comes my comrade. You should take him into your service too, as you will find him of great help.
Well, call him then, so that I can see what sort of man he is.
He is a little too far off for that,
replied Long.
He would hardly hear my voice, and he couldn't be here for some time yet, as he has so much to carry. I think I had better go and bring him myself.
At this time he stretched himself to such a height that his head was lost in the clouds, and made 2 or 3 strides, took his friend on his back, and set him down before the prince. The newcomer was a very fat man, and as round as a barrel. Your worship, Broad is my name, and I can make myself as wide as I please.
Let me see how you manage it.
Run, my lord, as fast as you can, and hide yourself in the wood, cried Broad, as he began to swell himself out. The prince did not understand why he should run into the wood, but when he saw Long flying towards it, he thought that he had better follow his example. He was only just in time, for Broad had so suddenly inflated himself that he nearly knocked the prince and his horse too. He covered all the space for acres around. You would have thought he was a mountain. At length Broad ceased to expand, and drew a deep breath that made the whole forest tremble, and shrank to its usual size. You have made me run away, said the prince. But it is not everyone that you meet a man of your sort. I will take you into my service. So the 3 companions continued their journey, and when they were drawing near the rocks, they met a man whose eyes were covered by a bandage.
Your Excellency, said Long, this is our third comrade. You will do well to take him into your service, and I assure you that you will find him worth his salt.
Who are you? Asked the prince. And why are your eyes bandaged? You can never see that way. On the contrary, my lord, it is because I see only too well that I am forced to bandage my eyes. Even so, I see as well as people have no bandage. When I take it off, my eyes pierce through everything. Everything I look at catches fire, or if it cannot catch fire, it falls into 1,000 pieces. They call me Quickeye. And so saying, he took off his bandage and turned towards a rock. As he fixed his eyes upon it, a crack was heard. In a few moments, it was nothing but a heap of sand. In the sand, something might be detected glittering brightly. Quickeye picked it up and brought it to the prince. It turned out to be a lump of pure gold. You are a wonderful creature, said the prince, and I should be a fool not to take you into my services. But since your eyes are so good, tell me if I'm very far from the Iron Castle, and what is happening just there. If you were traveling alone, replied Quickeye, it would take you at least a year to get there. But as we are with you, we shall arrive there tonight. Just now they are preparing supper. There's a princess in the castle. Do you see her? The wizard keeps her in a high tower, guarded by iron bars. Help me to deliver her, cried the prince, and they promised that they would. Then they all set out through the grey rocks, by the breach made by the eyes of Quickeye, and passing over great mountains and through deep woods. And every time they met with an obstacle, any of their three friends contrived somehow to put it aside. As the sun was setting, the prince beheld towers of the iron castle, and before it sank beneath the horizon he was crossing the iron bridge which led to the gates. He was only just in time, for no sooner had the sun disappeared altogether than the bridge drew itself up, and the gates shut themselves. There was no turning back now. The prince put up his horse in the stable, where everything looked as if a guest was expected, and then the whole party marched straight up to the castle. In the court, in the stables, and all over the great halls they saw a number of men richly dressed, but everyone turned into stone. They crossed an endless set of rooms, all opening into each other, till they reached the dining hall. It was brilliantly lighted, and the table was covered with wine and fruit, and was laid for 4. They waited a few minutes, expecting someone to come, but as nobody did, they sat down and began to eat and drink, for they were very hungry. When they had done their supper, they looked about for some place to sleep, but suddenly the door burst open, and the wizard entered the hall. He was an old and humpback, with a bald head and a grey beard that fell to his knees. He wore a black robe, and instead of a belt there were 3 iron circlets clasped at his waist. He led by the hand a lady of wonderful beauty, dressed in white, with a girdle of silver and a crown of pearls, but her face was pale and sad as death itself. The prince knew her in an instant, and moved eagerly forward, but the wizard gave him no time to speak, and said,
I know why you are here. Very good. You may have her, if for 3 nights following you can prevent her from making her escape. If you fail at this, you and your servants will be turned into stone, like all those who have come before you.
and, offering the princess a chair, he left the hall. The prince could not take his eyes from the princess. She was so lovely. He began to talk to her, but she neither answered nor smiled, and sat as if she were made of marble. He seated himself by her, and determined not to close his eyes that night, for fear she would escape him. And in order that she should be doubly guarded, Long stretched himself like a strap all around the room. Broad took his stand by the door and puffed himself out, so that not even a mouse could slip by. And Quickeye leaned against a pillar which stood in the middle of the floor and supported the roof. But in half a second they were all sound asleep, and they slept sound the whole night long. In the morning, at the first peep of dawn, the prince woke with a start, but the princess was gone. He roused his servants and implored them to tell him what they could. "Calm yourself, my lord," said Quickeye. "I have found her already, 100 miles from here in the forest. In the middle of the forest, an old oak, and at the top of the oak, an acorn. The acorn is the princess. If Long will take me on his shoulders, we shall soon bring her back." And sure enough, in less time than it takes to walk around a cottage, they had returned from the forest, and Long presented the acorn to the prince. "Now, your excellency, throw it on the ground." The prince obeyed, and was enchanted to see the princess appear at his side. But when the night peeped for the first time over the mountains, the door burst open as before, and the wizard entered with a loud laugh. Suddenly he caught sight of the princess, and his face darkened. He uttered a low growl, and the iron circlets gave way at the crash. He seized the young girl by the hand and bore her away with him. All that day the prince wandered about the castle, studying the curious treasures it contained, but everything looked as if life had suddenly come to a standstill. One place he saw a prince who had been turned into stone, in the act of brandishing a sword round in which his 2 hands were clasped. In another, the same doom had fallen upon a knight, and acting the same way. In the third, a serving man was standing eternally trying to convey a piece of beef in his mouth, and all around him were others, still preserving for evermore the attitudes they were in when the wizard had commanded them from henceforth be turned into marble. In the castle, and around the castle, was all dismal and desolate. Trees were there, but without leaves. Fields were there, but no grass grew on them. There was one river, but it never flowed, and no fish lived in it. No flowers blossomed, and no birds sang. 3 times during the day food appeared, as if by magic, for the prince and his servants, and it was not until supper was ended that the wizard appeared, as on the previous evening, and delivered the princess into the care of the prince. All 4 determined that this time they would keep awake at any cost, but it was of no use. Off they went as they had done before, and when the prince awoke the next morning, the room was again empty. With a pang of shame, he rushed to find Quickeye. "Awake, awake, Quickeye! Do you know what has become of the princess?" Quickeye rubbed his eyes and answered, "Yes, I see her. 200 miles from her is a mountain, and the mountain is a rock, and the rock is the precious stone. The stone is the princess. Long shall take me there, and we shall be back before you can turn around." So Long took him on his shoulders, and they set out. Every stride they covered 20 miles, and as they drew near, Quickeye fixed his burning eyes on the mountain. In an instant it split into 1,000 pieces, and in one of these sparkled a precious stone. They picked it up and brought it to the prince, who flung it hastily down, and as the stone touched the floor, the princess stood before him. When the wizard came, his eyes shot forth flames of fury. Crick-crack was heard, and another of his iron bands fell and broke. He seized the princess by the hand and led her off, growling louder than ever before. All the days, things went exactly as they'd done before the day before. After supper, the wizard brought back the princess, and looking him straight in the eyes, he said,
"We shall see which of us will gain the prize after all."
That night, they struggled their very hardest to keep awake, and even walked about instead of sitting down. But it was useless. One after another, they had to give in, and for the third time, the princess slipped through their fingers. When morning came, it was as usual the prince woke first, and as usual, the princess being gone, he rushed to Quickeye. Get up, Quickeye. Tell me where the princess is. Quickeye looked around for some time without answering. Oh, my lord, she is far, very far. 300 miles away, there lies a black sea. In the middle of the sea, there's a little shell, and in the shell there's fixed a gold ring. The gold ring is the princess. But do not vex your soul, we will get her. Only today, Long must take Broad with him. He will be wanted badly. So Long took Quickeye on one shoulder and Broad on the other, and they set out. On each stride they left 30 miles behind them. When they reached the Black Sea, Quickeye showed them the spot where they must seek the shell. But though Long stretched down his hand as far as he could go, he could not find the shell, for it lay at the bottom of the sea. Wait a moment, comrades. It will be all right. I will help you. Then he swelled himself out, so that you would have thought that he could barely have been held. And he stood down, and he drank. He drank so much at every mouthful that only a minute or so passed before the water had sunk enough for Long to put his hand to the bottom. He soon found the shell and pulled out the ring, but time had been lost and Long had double burden to carry. The dawn was breaking fast before they got back to the castle, where the prince was waiting for them with agony and fear. Soon the first rays of the sun were peeping over the tops of the mountains. The door burst open, finding the prince standing alone. The wizard broke the peals of wicked laughter. But as he laughed, a loud crash was heard in the air, and the princess stood before the enchanter. Where Quickeye, who was watching from afar, had told Long of the terrible danger now threatening the prince, and Long, summoning all his strength for one gigantic effort, had thrown the ring right through the window. Then the princess at length broke this enchanted silence, and blushing like a rose, gave the prince her thanks for unlocking her deliverance. But it was not only the princess who was restored to life by the flight of the wicked black crow. The marble figures became men once more, and took up their occupations just as they had left them. The horses neighed in the stables, the flowers blossomed in the garden, the birds flew in the air, the fish darted in the water. Everywhere you looked, all was life, all was joy. And the knights who had been turned into stone came in after body to offer their homage to the prince who had set them free. "Do not thank me," he said, "for I have done nothing. Without my faithful servants, Long, Broad, and Quickeye, I would have even been one of you." And with these words he bade them farewell, and departed with the princess and his faithful companions for the kingdom of his father. The old king, who had long since given up all hope, wept for joy with the sight of his son, and insisted that the wedding should take place as soon as possible. And the knights who had been enchanted in the Iron Castle were invited to the ceremony, and after it had taken place, Long, Broad, and Quicksilver took leave of the young couple, saying that they were going to look for more work. The prince offered them all their hearts could desire if they would only remain with him, but they replied that an idle life would not please them, and that they could never be happy unless they were busy. So they went away to seek their fortunes, and for all I know, they're still seeking.
Man, I missed a Lycanroc. Dang it, Pokemon game. Why do you tease me? I'm reading. Okay, 10:31. My vision's already starting to get a little blurry. Must mean I need caffeine. Caffeine. Caffeinations. Wait, does this have caffeine in it? Politely caffeinated. Oh, wow. As long as it's caffeinated with politeness. Let's see. Carbonated water, tangerine juice concentrate, pear juice concentrate, lemon juice concentrate, caffeine derived from coffee beans. Nice. This is, wait, how much? 15% juice. Yeah, it's better than most sodas. Unsweetened, even better. This is New Wave Soda, tangerine. Not available in my bookstore, sorry. Uh, stretch again. Oh. A quick drink. I wish the Pokemon game wouldn't use red. I can't read it. Come here. And I'm going to read at least one more. I may try to read two. I haven't made up my mind yet. Excuse me. Okay. Oh, ow. Let's stretch. Okay. Let us get into the fourth story. I haven't even made it halfway through this book yet, have I? Or a third and a half. Big book. That's fairy tales. Little words. Little print anyway. So. Fourth story for the night. Maid Maleen. From Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. There once was a king who had a son who asked in marriage the daughter of a mighty king. She was called Maid Maleen and was very beautiful. As her father wished to give her to another, the prince was rejected. But as they both loved each other with all their hearts, they would not give each other up. And Maid Maleen said to her father, "I can and will take no other for my husband." Then the king flew into a passion and ordered a dark tower to be built, into which no ray of sunshine or moonlight should enter. When it was finished, he said, "Therein shalt you be imprisoned for 7 years, and then when I come to see if thy perverse spirit is broken. Meat and drink for the 7 years were carried into the tower, and then she and her waiting women were led to it and walled up, and thus cut off from the sky and from the earth. And there they sat in the darkness, and knew not when day or night began. The king's son often went round and round the tower and called their names, but no sound from without pierced through the thick walls. What else could they do but lament and complain? Meanwhile, the time passed, and by the diminution of the food and drink, they knew that the 7 years were coming to an end. They thought that the moment of their deliverance was come, but no stroke of the hammer was heard. No stone fell out of the wall, and it seemed to Maid Maleen that her father had forgotten her. As they only had food for a short time longer, and saw a miserable death awaiting them, Maid Maleen said, "We must try it's our last chance to see if we can break through the wall." She took a bread knife and picked and bored at the mortar of the stone, and when she was tired, her waiting maid took her turn. With great labor, they succeeded in getting out one stone, and then a second, then a third. And when 3 days were over, the first ray of light fell in their darkness, and at last the opening was so large that they could look out. The sky was blue, and a fresh breeze played on their faces, but how melancholy everything looked all around. Her father's castle lay in ruins. The town and villages were, so far as could be seen, destroyed by fire. The fields far and wide were laid to waste, and no human being was visible. When the opening in the wall was large enough for them to slip through, the waiting maid sprang down first, and then Maid Maleen followed. But where were they to go? The enemy had ravaged the whole kingdom, driven away the king, and slain all the inhabitants. They wandered forth to seek another country, but nowhere did they find a shelter, or a human being to give them a handful of bread. And their need was so great that they were forced to appease their hunger with nettles. When, after long journeying, they came to another country, they tried to get work everywhere, but everywhere they looked, they were turned away, and no one would have pity on them. At last they arrived in a large city and went to the royal palace. They were also ordered away, but at last the cook said that they might stay in the kitchen and be scullions. The son of the king, in whose kingdom they were, was, however, the very man who had betrothed to Maid Maleen. His father had chosen another bride for him, whose face was as ugly as her heart was wicked. The wedding was fixed, and the maiden had already arrived. But because of her great ugliness, however, she shut herself up in a room, and allowed no one to see her. And Maid Maleen had to take her meals from the kitchen. When the day came for the bride and the bridegroom to go to the church, she was ashamed of her ugliness, and afraid that if she showed herself in the streets, she would be mocked and laughed at by the people. Then she said to Maid Maleen,
"Great piece of luck has befallen thee. I have sprained my foot, and cannot walk well through the streets. Thou shalt put on my wedding clothes and take my place. A greater honor than thou canst not have."
Maid Maleen, however, refused it, and said,
"I wish no honor which would be unsuitable for me."
It was in vain, too, that the bride offered her gold. At last she said angrily,
"If thou dost not pay me, then it shall cost thy life. But do not speak the word, and thy head will lie at thy feet."
Then she was forced to obey, and put on the bride's magnificent clothes and all her jewels. When she entered the royal hall, everyone was amazed at her beauty, and the king said to his son, "This is the bride I have chosen for thee, and whom thou must lead to church." The bridegroom was astonished and said, "She's like my maid Maleen. I should believe that it was she herself, but she's long been shut up the tower or dead." Then he took her by the hand and led her to church. On the way was a nettle plant, and she said,
"O nettle plant, little nettle plant, what dost thou here alone? I have known the time when I ate thee unboiled, and when I ate thee unroasted."
"What art thou saying?" said the king's son.
"Nothing," she replied. "I was only thinking of Maid Maleen."
He was surprised that she knew about her, but kept silence. When they came to the footplank in the churchyard, she said,
"Footbridge, do not break. I am not the true bride."
"What art thou saying?" said the king's son.
"Nothing,"
she replied.
"I was thinking only of Maid Maleen."
"Dost thou know Maid Maleen?"
"No,"
she answered.
"how should I know her? I have only heard of her."
When they came to the church door, she said once more,
"Church door, break not. I am not the true bride."
"What art thou saying there?" he asked.
"Ah,"
she answered.
"I was only thinking of Maid Maleen."
Then he took out a precious chain, put it round her neck, and fastened the clasp. Thereupon they entered the church, and the priest joined their hands together before the altar, and married them. He led her home, but she did not speak a single word the whole way. When they got back to the royal palace, she hurried into the bride's chamber and put off the magnificent clothes and jewels and dressed herself in a grey gown, and kept nothing but the jewel on her neck, which she had received from the bridegroom. When the night came, and the bride that was led to the prince's apartment, she let her veil fall over her face, that he did not observe the deception. As soon as everyone had gone away, he said to her, "What didst thou say to the nettle plant which was growing by the wayside?" "To which nettle plant?" she asked. "I don't talk to nettle plants." "If thou didn't do it, then thou art the true bride," he said. So she bethought herself,
"I must go into the maid who keeps my thoughts for me."
She went out and sought Maid Maleen.
"Girl, what hast thou been saying to the nettle?" "I said nothing but, O nettle plant, little nettle plant, what dost thou here alone? I have known the time when I ate thee unboiled, and ate thee unroasted."
The bride ran back to the chamber and said,
"I know now what I said to the nettle."
and she repeated the words which she had just heard. "But what didst thou say to the footbridge when we went over it?" asked the king's son.
"To the footbridge?" he answered. "I don't talk to footbridges."
"Then thou art not the true bride." She sighed again.
"I must go out into my maid who keeps my thoughts for me."
And ran out and found Maid Maleen.
"Girl, what did thou say to the footbridge?" "I said nothing but, footbridge, do not break. I am not the true bride."
"That cost thee thy life!" cried the bride. But she hurried into the room and said,
"I know what I said to the footbridge."
and she repeated the words. "But why didst thou say that to the church door?"
"To the church door?"
she replied.
"I don't talk to church doors."
"Then thou art not the true bride." She went and found Maid Maleen, and said,
"Girl, what did thou say to the church door?" "I said nothing but, church door, break not. I am not the true bride."
"That will break thy neck for thee!" cried the bride, and flew into a terrible passion. But she hastened back to the room and said,
"I know what I said to the church door."
and she repeated the words. "But where hast the jewel which I gave thee at the church door?"
"What jewel?"
she answered.
Those does not give me any jewel.
I put it myself around thy neck. I have fastened this myself. If thou dost not know that, thou art not the true bride. He drew the veil from her face, and when he saw her immeasurable ugliness, he sprang back, terrified, and said, How comest thou here? Who art thou?
I am thy betrothed bride, because I feared lest the people should mock me when they saw me out of doors. I commanded a scullery maid to dress herself in my clothes and go to the church instead of me.
Where's the girl? He said. I want to see her. Go and bring her here. She went out and told the servants that the scullery maid was an impostor, and that they must take her out to the courtyard and strike off her head. The servants laid hold of Maid Maleen and wanted to drag her out, but she screamed so loudly for help that the king's son heard her voice, hurried out of his chamber, and ordered them to set the maiden free instantly. The lights were brought, and then he saw on her neck the gold chain which he had given her at the church door. Thou art the true bride, said he, who went with me to the church. Come with me now to my room. When they were both alone, he said, On the way to the church thou didst name Maid Maleen, who is my betrothed bride. If I could believe it possible, I should think she was standing before me. Thou art like her in every respect. She answered, I am Maid Maleen, for thy sake was imprisoned 7 years in the darkness, who suffered hunger and thirst, and has lived so long in want and poverty. Today, however, the sun was shining on me once more. I was married to thee in the church, and I am thy lawful wife. Then they kissed each other, and they were happy all the days of their lives. The false bride was rewarded for what she had done by having her head cut off. The tower in which Maid Maleen had been imprisoned remained standing for a long time, and when children passed by it, they sang, Cling, clang, Gloria, who sits within this tower. A king's daughter she sits within, a sight of her I cannot win. The wall it will not break, the stone cannot be pierced. Little hands with your coat so gay, follow me as fast as you may. That was a singing story. I gotta watch out for those singing stories. Oh, how long was this one? 12. Ooh, and this one is 18 pages technically, but I may go ahead and end it early tonight, or early-ish. Sorry I started so late, though. I didn't start late. I didn't start reading till late, but whatever. Anyway, anywho, uh, let us see who's on We Can Raid, shall we? Okay. I would have rated guilty, but he ended way before I did. Let's see who is on. That looks like it's really than me right now. Ping is on. I've been Ping for a while. Dusk is on. Woo Streams is on. He's actually the one who does the little comic, which is kind of cool. Zero's on. Librarian. Zero's on. Oh no! Damn. Not what I wanted. Come back. Okay. That's my own stream. Huh, that's funny. Joe is off. Here I am. I don't know what that Pokemon is. So many Pokemon I don't know. Stubby's on. Guess we're in Red Dusk. Yep. Oh, that was my post. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and read Duskwalker. She's playing Overwatch. See how long she's been on. She's been on 25 minutes. Okay. Okay, so those here. My subby raid message. Forward raid message. And raid dusk. And can't copy and paste my message. Okay. Gonna raid dusk. As I said, she's cool, good artist. She made my second. And my computer's freezing. Crap. Okay, the raid is initiated. Raiding in 4, 3, 2. See everyone. Bye. No, wait. Oh, it's an auto raid. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll see everyone next week. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning, whichever you may have. See you over in dusks. Bye all.